Redemption isn't about becoming likable, it's about facing what you broke, and that's where My Hero Academia starts to stumble. In anime and manga, redemption arcs are often some of the most powerful stories we get. They let flawed characters confront their past mistakes, reflect on the harm they've caused, and attempt to become better people. When done well, they add weight, maturity, and realism to a story. And when done poorly, they feel empty, almost like change happened simply because the narrative decided it was time. My Hero Academia sits uncomfortably between these two extremes. Today, I want to look at the series' most prominent redemption arcs, Bakugo's and Endeavor's. Both characters begin in deeply unpleasant places. Both are driven by ego, insecurity, and an obsession with strength. And both are framed by the story as characters who grow. But the way the redemption is handled could not be more different. While Bakugo's growth is clearly intentional and important, it often lacks the emotional weight and accountability needed to feel earned. Endeavor's arc, despite being deeply flawed and uncomfortable, ultimately lands harder because it understands something crucial about redemption. It has to cost something. Before comparing the two, it's worth defining what a redemption arc actually needs in order to work. Redemption is not a switch that flips, it's a process. For an audience to buy into it, a character has to acknowledge their past mistakes clearly and honestly, not vaguely, not defensively, but with an understanding of what they did and why it mattered. There also needs to be a genuine effort to change. Redemption isn't about doing the bare minimum or saying the right words. It's about sustained action, especially when it's difficult. Consequences matter too. I don't believe every redemption arc needs harsh punishment, but without some form of loss, resistance, or fallout, many readers will struggle to accept that the change is real. Finally, there needs to be emotional nuance. Redemption should involve reflection on the psychological and emotional damage caused, both to the character themselves and to others. Redemption arcs matter because they reflect something very human. Growth is rarely clean or linear. People avoid accountability. They rationalize their behavior. They backslide. Good redemption stories embrace that messiness. Bad ones skip it. Bakugo Katsuki starts My Hero Academia as an arrogant, aggressive, and openly hostile character. His superiority complex defines him. He lashes out whenever his worldview is challenged and treats weakness, especially Izuku's, as something deserving of cruelty. He isn't just abrasive or rude, he's violent. From the beginning, Bakugo is a bully in the most literal sense. Someone who uses his power to intimidate and harm others. The story clearly positions him as someone who needs to grow. To Bakugo's credit, his growth is gradual. He doesn't suddenly become a different person. His personality never fully changes, and that's one of the stronger parts of his arc. Even at the end of the series, he's still loud, emotional, and explosive. What changes is how that energy is directed. Over time, he becomes more self-aware, more capable of working with others, and less obsessed with tearing Izuku down to prop himself up. Moments like his quiet apology or his increasing willingness to work as part of a team show genuine internal movement. There are also moments of vulnerability that add complexity to his character. During the provisional license exam, Bakugo is forced to confront the fact that raw power and aggression aren't enough. He fails, not because he's weak, but because he cannot emotionally connect with or protect others. That realization matters. It shows that the story understands what Bakugo's flaws actually are. The problem is that the narrative never truly forces Bakugo to confront the harms he's caused. His violent behavior is repeatedly brushed aside. Early in the series alone, he attacks Izuku during a quirk assessment, openly acknowledges that he's using potentially lethal force during a training exercise, and later strikes Izuku in the head during the final exams. These are conscious choices, and yet meaningful consequences never follow. Aizawa, a teacher portrayed as strict and pragmatic, consistently lets Bakugo off the hook. After reviewing footage of Bakugo's behavior during the battle trial, all he offers is a vague warning. Meanwhile, Izuku is constantly scrutinized and pushed to improve. That inconsistency undercuts Bakugo's arc because it removes external accountability. If no one in authority treats his behavior as unacceptable, then his later growth feels optional rather than necessary. Bakugo's redemption also leans heavily on Izuku acting as an empathy soundboard. Izuku forgives Bakugo almost immediately, with very little exploration of his own pain. This isn't a rivalry where insults just bounce off of each other. We are shown repeatedly that Bakugo's actions have hurt him. Early on, Izuku flinches when Bakugo uses his quirk at all. He's visibly afraid in early encounters. And yet, when Bakugo apologizes, the moment is rushed and emotionally undercut by how quickly Izuku accepts it. Izuku never gets the space to react as a victim. He exists primarily to validate Bakugo's own growth, and that actually just makes Bakugo's redemption worse. He bullied you, seemingly for years, for no good reason, and there's no grudge, no bad blood, at all? I'm not even saying Izuku has to dislike Bakugo, but the fact that he idolizes him is just strange, and I think that actually hurts both their characters. But more importantly, Bakugo's redemption happens almost entirely on his own terms. He doesn't lose friends, he doesn't face sustained pushback from his peers, his environment never truly challenges him. Even failing the provisional license exam, the closest thing he gets to a consequence, is treated as a temporary inconvenience and resolved off-screen. There's a lot of before and a lot of after, but very little of the difficult middle road where real change is forged. Now compare that to Endeavor. Endeavor enters the story as an abusive, obsessive, and deeply broken man. His desire to surpass All Might consumes him to the point where he treats his family like tools. His abuse of Rei and his children, especially Shoto, is cruel and traumatic. Endeavor isn't just flawed, he's monstrous, and that makes the idea of redeeming him risky from the outset. What makes Endeavor's arc work better is that it begins with acknowledgement. He recognizes explicitly that he failed as a father and as a husband. He doesn't excuse his behavior as misunderstood or unnecessary. He owns it. That doesn't absolve him, but it establishes a foundation for change. His effort to atone is not framed as seeking forgiveness, but as trying to become someone who no longer causes harm. Endeavor also faces real, lasting consequences. His family is fractured, his children don't trust him, and some may never forgive him. His reputation is permanently damaged. His rise to the #1 hero spot is hollow, overshadowed by guilt, scrutiny, and circumstance. The story never lets him forget what he's done. His past is constantly reflected back at him through his relationships, especially with Dabi and Natsuo. Emotionally, Endeavor's arc carries far more weight. His internal struggle is uncomfortable and complex. He grapples with shame, regret, and the knowledge that no amount of heroism can undo what he's done at home. Moments like his fight against Hood, where he sees his former self reflected back at him, shows real introspection. He isn't just changing his behavior, he's confronting the kind of person he allowed himself to become. Bakugo's actions are obviously nowhere near as bad or complex as Endeavor's, so he doesn't need the same amounts of consequence or pushback, but he certainly needs some amount of struggle. Endeavor gets plenty. And to be clear, that doesn't mean Endeavor's arc is without serious flaws. The story rarely centers on the actual victims. Rei's trauma and recovery are barely explored. Her agency is minimal, and her decision to reconnect with Endeavor happens largely off-screen, as does her reconnecting with Shoto and them getting past the whole burning thing. And speaking of Shoto, his forgiveness of Endeavor comes too quickly, with not enough time spent on his internal conflict. There is also a lack of institutional response. No investigation, no legal consequences. For storytelling purposes, this isn't inherently a bad thing, but then it kinda feels like the narrative is framing domestic abuse as a private family issue, which, in a narrative meant for teens, can be seen as deeply troubling. Still, Endeavor's redemption ultimately lands harder than Bakugo's because it demands something from him. It cost him. His family is broken, his career and body are permanently damaged. The psychopathic son stands as a living embodiment of his failures. The narrative constantly reinforces that what he did was wrong, and it never pretends otherwise. To sum things up, both arcs are flawed. Bakugo's redemption could have been strengthened by real accountability, meaningful consequences, and allowing Izuku to exist as a full character with justified anger and fear. Endeavor's arc could have been vastly improved by giving Rei and the children narrative agency. They should be full characters, not just set dressing for Endeavor's own arc. But when comparing the two, Endeavor's redemption is ultimately more effective because it's built on consequence, reflection, and loss, rather than convenience. My Hero Academia shows us that redemption can be powerful, but only when the story is brave enough to confront the damage left behind. That's all for now. If you found this video helpful or thought-provoking, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. It really helps support the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.